God's science. Erroneously, traditional science theorizes that all energy existing in the universe converged in one point, with its own space. And that from this single point, about 14 billion years ago, the whole universe had been created. Nevertheless, this theory is without foundations, and destined to remain inconclusive. Its contradictions originate from Einstein's faulty conclusions, and from the reverence shown by modern scientists, who are too afraid to take a new stand that may not be aligned with the late scientist. Einstein believed that the universe was like one closed space, and that one fixed number of atoms had always existed. Hence, he did not believe that new atoms are constantly formed from waves. The Jewish scientist also believed the space to be independent from the concept of time. In this regard, his confusion may have originated from that word makom, which had been used in the Bible to define without distinction God, and also space, as if this last one was also eternal and indivisible. Instead, any space, even the hypothetical original point of energy, is always divisible. Each space could be constantly split by one movement that occurs at one time. There are no time and movement if there is no space. There are no movement and space without time. There are no space and time without movement. But if one of the three exists, also the other two exist. If the creation began from one point, existing in one space prior to the Big Bang, that same point could not be the beginning of time, and creator of all things. One space before the Big Bang necessarily implies also the presence of a time pre-existing that same event. Furthermore, one indivisible point could not exist anyhow. In fact, the smallest space could only be a sphere, and even if the original point of energy, prior to the Big Bang, was infinitely small, it could not have been a sphere. The sphere has a perimeter at the diameter, but also smaller perimeters as we move upward, or downward, from the larger diameter. The concept of infinitely small precludes the possibility of smaller perimeters. The unimaginable point, infinitely small, smaller than a sphere, and indivisible, if exploded would have spread its energy at once. The lack of space, in the indivisible point infinitely small, eliminates the possibility of time and movement, for the creation of the universe. While instead, the universe is created in time. Thus, the universe did not begin from one space, or from an indivisible point, which does not exist. It is difficult for us to imagine the creation, also because God, as the first source, caused the energy to expand, but was never moved by any other preceding cause. The concept of causality existing in our world does not apply to God and its creation. In our world, life is a constant chain reaction. Everything we experience is the effect of a previous cause, and also the cause for a new effect. In fact, we have no knowledge of any source that is now moving, and that was not previously moved by another source. But how can one first existence evolve from nothing? Any existence that we know of leaves always restricted within the three concepts: time, space, and movement. As for example, at any moment in time, you occupy one space during your life, which is movement. These three concepts always exist together, or else there is lack of existence in our dimension. Time, space, and movement started simultaneously, as God generated the so-called Big Bang, from one dimension of stability, and caused one movement, quantum mechanics, which symmetrically fragments and recombines all energy to form in time one expanding space, the universe. Since the event of the Big Bang, the universe is like one mirror split into many small mirrors, which are constantly joining and separating through this same movement. Like in a big puzzle, every edge of each small mirror is symmetrically opposite, and complementary to the mirror standing next on its side. Two contiguous small mirrors are attracted by this natural movement, and together they generate a new, and third form of the same energy. This is how the universe continues to expand, in always new forms. God's idea fragments its energy to spread it in one universe, which is in constant expansion, dimension with time, space and movement, and to fill one void, that is infinite beyond all borders, dimension without time, space or movement. This is inconceivable for us, which we live restricted by those three concepts. The law of attraction between two opposite, and complementary elements, is the single universal law that also provides for the existence of one order in the universe, and that rearranges the symmetries of its fragmented forms. All forms of energy in the universe are orchestrated by a constant rearrangement of their magnetic fields, as if they were the many pawns moved mechanically in one eternal chess game, and by the same hand. Quantum mechanics is God's instrument that constantly reunites and re-separates all energy, in order to always create new forms. The concept always, so unreachable for us, is the endless bridge between one limited dimension, universe, and one infinite, void. We can now define this constant recurrence as one law, one direction, or also one will, since it remains forever unchanged. What is beyond the universe and beyond time? If it is true that we could count time backwards 13 billion years, or even 14 billion, why not also 15? Before 14 billion years ago, and before the space of the universe, time did not exist. What then? Stability. An unreachable concept for those who are made of energy.